What is up guys, welcome back to Kit Guru. I am James and this is a brand new all-in-one CPU cooler from Corsair. Before we dive into this review today, I just want to quickly remind any of you guys that have not yet subscribed to the channel, please make sure you do that today, if you like the content that is. If you want to help us out in other ways, you can always head over to our store, pick up some of the cool Kit Guru merch, and don't forget the kitguru.net website where you can catch up on all the latest tech news and read our detailed, in-depth written reviews. So a brand new all-in-one CPU cooler from Corsair. This is the H115i Elite Capellix, and this is now Corsair's flagship all-in-one CPU cooler. So out goes the RGB Platinum and in comes the Elite Capellix. You will still be able to pick up the RGB Pro XT that's been out for a few months. That will still be available, so you'll have the choice of no RGB fans or RGB fans still, which is good to have. The Elite Capellix is, like I said, a brand new all-in-one CPU cooler. It's available in the H115i 280mm version, which is this one. You can also pick it up in the H100i 240mm version and the H150i 360mm. In terms of pricing, the 240mm version is priced at £149. The H115i 280mm, which we have here, that is priced at £159. And then the H150i 360mm version, that's £179. So that pricing is in line with other similar all-in-one CPU coolers on the market. However, it is at the top end of that kind of price range. I began this video by introducing this as a brand new all-in-one CPU cooler from Corsair, and that is technically correct. The Elite Capellix is a brand new series, but a lot of the hardware, the cooling hardware, all the internal parts of this CPU cooler have been reused before in the RGB Platinum and in the RGB Pro XT. So you're not getting a new pump, you're not getting a new cold plate. You basically, with this, you're just getting some new RGB features. The Elite Capellix, as you can probably tell from the name, uses Corsair's brand new Capellix LEDs, which are said to be around 60% brighter than traditional SMD LEDs and also have a around 40 to 60% better efficiency, which is great. That means that they can be used in all kinds of different products. They can be put into wireless keyboards and small memory modules, and obviously used in a CPU block. So that's what we've got here. It'd be good to see what kind of difference this new RGB lighting effect has compared to the older version, so we'll compare those two a little bit later on. First we'll unbox it and see what's inside the packaging. So there's a user manual and a warranty guide, piece of foam on the top for protection, a couple of ML140 RGB fans. There's one bag with all the Intel mounting hardware and an Intel backplate. Another one for AMD's AM4 platform. Another one for AMD's STR4 platform. So that's for Threadripper installation. You also have a replacement top for the CPU block that's a clear acrylic with a Corsair logo on it. So you can obviously swap that out for what is already installed to the CPU block. There's another bag full of mounting screws, long and small mounting screws for the fans. Another bag with a Allen key. So that's obviously to swap between the two different CPU block tops, and that's actually a plastic Allen key, which is interesting. And then there's obviously the cooler itself. So with this being the H115i, we have a 280mm radiator. This is a 27mm thick radiator, and it looks virtually identical to the one in the RGB Pro XT and the RGB Platinum series. The only difference I can see is the logo on either side. You just got a plain Corsair Sail logo now, before there was the Sail logo and the Corsair logo next to it. It's a pretty nice looking radiator, good quality, nice smooth and even black coating on it. The tubing on the radiator is fixed, so there's no rotation at the radiator side. Tubing is covered with a braided sheathing, and it is a reinforced rubber tubing below that sheathing. In terms of the CPU block, in fact, let's have a look and see what is different between this and the RGB Pro XT series. So we can actually compare these two side by side. This is the older RGB Pro XT. This is the new Elite Capellix. As you can see, those two radiators are virtually identical. And like I mentioned, the only difference really is that top logo. They both have fixed tubing at either end. They both got braided sleeving over the reinforced rubber tubes, and they both got the articulating 90-degree fittings. With the two CPU blocks side by side, you can see that the new Elite Capellix is quite a lot taller than the RGB Pro XT, and this CPU block is the same as the RGB Platinum, so I'm not sure whether I'm a fan of that taller block. I think I prefer the shorter one. The shape of it, the angles on the Elite Capellix are sharper. This is a bit softer. The Elite Capellix looks a bit more aggressive. At the base of the Elite Capellix block, you can see it is a copper micro-channel cold plate. This does come with a pre-applied thermal compound coating, and the pre-installed brackets are for an Intel platform. If you want to swap these out, they just pull off and clip back in position. So if you want to install on an AMD platform, you need to swap these for the AMD brackets, but they slide in and out pretty easily, so that's not a big job. We still have quite a bunch of cables that comes from the CPU block, and that is not really something I like to see. I prefer as minimal amount of cables at the CPU block as possible. It just makes it much easier to hide those cables later on when you come into the end of the installation process and trying to manage the cables and make the system look neat and tidy. As you can see with the older Pro XT, we had plenty of cables on that as well, but you did also have this additional USB cable that plugged into the CPU block. That has gone with the Elite Capellix. You now connect that USB cable to the Commander core unit that comes with the cooler. So the main feature of this Elite Capellix is obviously the use of the new Capellix LEDs, and those Capellix LEDs are underneath this top cover. There's a total of 33 LEDs under here, and you can actually swap this top cover for a different one. Use the plastic Allen key that Corsair provide. I think they must give you that in plastic just so that you don't put too much torque through these Allen keys and potentially do some damage either to the nuts, to the bolts, or to the threads below. So yeah, that's the top cover off. As you can see, that's like a mostly black top cover, and then this replacement is a clear one, so obviously you're going to get more RGB lighting shining through this clear one. If you can see, with that clear cover on, when the cooler is turned off, it kind of has a white background, so that might work well for people who are using a white themed system. And if you go one step further, you can actually remove the whole Capellix unit, and below that you can just see the 4 threads that these Allen keys screw into, and then a connection for the Capellix LEDs. So it'll be interesting actually if we can have a look in here, if we can get this cover off. Oh, that's quite easy, that comes off. So underneath that diffuser there is a few different sections. I'm guessing that these plastic bits just split up the different RGB sections, so you've got like 2 or 3 different rings of RGB lighting patterns. And you can see inside there, if we just take off one of those, you can see the circuit board and then the little tiny Capellix LEDs. And it's quite a bit different to what you would normally see. You probably would normally just see 5, maybe 6 or 7 SMD LEDs inside there. So yeah, that is quite a bit different to what we're used to seeing on top of the CPU block. And who knows, maybe these Capellix LEDs emit less heat, so that may even help with the performance of this CPU cooler. And as you can see, with that Capellix unit removed, that is the extra height that has been added to this cooler. So it is the Capellix unit that is making this Elite Capellix much taller than the original. Another interesting feature of this removable top panel is the fact that you can rotate it and you can put it on in 4 different positions. So no matter how you've got the CPU block orientated over the CPU, you should be able to remove this and always have that Corsair logo facing the correct way up. And the fans that come with the Elite Capellix series are Corsair's ML series fans, the ML RGB fans, which are virtually the same as the RGB Pro XT, but with 8 RGB SMD LEDs just behind the fan blades. These have a speed range of 400 to 2000 RPM, and they're a high static pressure fan, so they're ideal for using on only one radiators. We've obviously seen these fans plenty of times before, so we're not going to go into too much detail about them. We know that they're quite loud when they're running at their full speed. In fact, on the A500 air cooler, they were ridiculously loud. But yeah, you may be better off adjusting your fan profiles to get the best balance between noise and performance with these fans. We really don't recommend these, or we don't recommend running these at maximum RPM if you are worried about noise levels, because they can get a little bit annoying and a little distracting. So they're great fans. They have high static pressure and they're ideal for use on radiators, but they are just a little bit loud. We're not expecting any major leap forwards in terms of thermal performance, because this is based on the same cooling hardware as the previous RGB Platinum and the RGB Pro XT. However, Corsair tell us that they have done some software tweaks to the Elite Capellix. The pump speed runs at 200 RPM higher across the board in the iCUE profiles. The maximum pump speed is still the same at 2700 RPM, and also the fan profiles, they've been tuned towards performance, so maybe those will have a slight effect on the thermal performance. So we'll test that out now, install the cooler on the test bench, and then we'll run those thermal performance tests that we usually do. Our test system is Intel Z390 based. It uses a Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Extreme motherboard, an Intel Core i9 9900KS CPU, and we've got 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro memory, and we use a Corsair LE120 SSD drive for the operating system, and the test bench is powered by a Seasonic Prime PX 850 watt power supply. So let's get on with the installation. We expect, again, this will be the same installation process as the RGB Platinum and the RGB Pro XT, but we'll just run you through that process again for those of you that are not familiar with it. So the first thing you need to do is take this Intel specific backplate and just slip that around the back of the motherboard, line it up with the holes on the motherboard, and there is a self-adhesive backing to that. You can just peel the self-adhesive cover off, and then that should help retain it to the motherboard. Luckily on our test bench it holds itself in position just. And then next you need to take the LGA 115X or LGA 1200 standoffs. These come in a little bag marked up 115X 1200. You just simply screw those by hand to the motherboard backplate. So there's a total of 4 of these. You just need to screw all 4 in by hand. So that's basically all the preparation needed for the motherboard. You could now move on to installing your fans to the radiator, and that's exactly what we'll do before we mount the cooler onto the motherboard. If you're installing this in a case, you'll have to decide just where you want to place the radiator. In our test bench it's a little bit different, so we can just screw the fan straight into position and then mount the cooler up to the brackets on our test bench. From the factory, the base or the thermal transfer plate on the CPU block does come with a pre-applied thermal compound coating, but we've removed that for this video, so we just need to apply a bit of thermal compound, and then we can just lower the CPU block over the CPU, make contact with the CPU heat spreader, and then just install the four thumb screws to the standoffs. Like we always do, we tighten the thumb screws up in an X-shaped pattern. That just helps to spread the pressure evenly across the CPU, and it gives you optimal CPU to CPU block contact. So bundled in with the Elite Capellix, you get one of these Corsair Commander core units, and this is like a slimmed down version of the Commander Pro. You just plug in all your fans, all your RGB lighting to this Commander core unit, and then you control the fan speed and all the RGB lighting effects and patterns using the Corsair iCUE software. It also has a temperature input on here as well, temperature probe input, so you can monitor temperature using this as well, and it's quite a good solution. Everything's all in one unit with this, so all your cables go to this, and then you just have to worry about tidying the cables up afterwards. I would like Corsair to offer a solution out of the box for enthusiasts such as myself that can manage their own fan curves using the motherboard BIOS. You know, just simple splitter cables so you can connect the fans and the RGB lighting direct to the motherboard. Not everybody needs to have this Corsair ecosystem. Personally, I might just buy a Corsair cooler and then nothing else in my system, and I'd much prefer it if we could just, you know, connect up direct to the motherboard. It makes the system look a little bit neater, there's less cables to hide, and obviously you've not got to find somewhere in the case for this Commander core unit. So that's something I'd like to see from Corsair. It's not just with the Elite Capellix. That's been the same problem I've had with all their recent all-in-one CPU coolers, and you know, it'd be nice to have that option. If you don't want to use all the RGB features, you can just plug direct to the motherboard. So to complete the installation, the 3-pin TAC cable coming from the pump just needs to be connected up to a motherboard fan header. I'm chosen the CPU fan header on the motherboard for that. And then this other cable coming from the pump unit that is extremely massive, that needs to be connected up to the Commander core. Just pop that in at the bottom there. And then the USB cable coming from the Commander core, you need to connect that to one of your USB 2.0 headers on your motherboard. Then the power cable coming from the Commander core, obviously that just connects then up to a spare SATA power cable from your power supply. We just need to connect up the PWM cables from the fans. That goes in one side of the Commander core unit. And then the RGB cables also coming from the fans, they go in the other side of the Commander core unit. Start from port number 1 and work your way up. You've got a total of 6 fan and 6 RGB ports on this Commander core, so you can potentially run push-pull fans, or you can add other Corsair RGB components and control them using this Commander core unit. So before we jump into the thermal performance testing, I just want to have a quick look at the RGB features and see how these new Capellix LEDs compare with the old RGB Pro XT. Control of the RGB is the same. We still use the Corsair iCUE software, and inside the iCUE software, if you just go on to the lighting effects section, you can switch between various different effects. There's a few different rainbow effects. You can choose a colour shift where it fades in and out of different colours. You've also got a pulse option where the colours pulse in and out. And then there's things like strobing effects, a marquee effect, virtually everything you can think of. And you can even set up the RGB lighting to kind of react against music you're listening to. And there's even features in games as well, so you can have the RGB lighting react to what's happening in the game as well, which is, you know, it's a pretty cool feature. It's probably not something I'd use. I'd probably end up going for just a static colour of maybe white or red or something like that, because I'm a bit boring. But for those of you that are really into your RGB lighting, Corsair iCUE probably is one of the best solutions out there. Some of them can be really annoying, but this one is probably, you know, probably the best you can get. So I've just switched back to the rainbow effect, and I'll bring in the RGB Pro XT and try and put these side by side so that we can compare the difference between the old SMD LEDs and the new Capellix LEDs. And I don't know whether you can see that, but to be honest, there's not a huge difference. The Capellix maybe a little bit more brighter and a little bit more vivid, but there's not a massive difference really between them, and I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy this cooler to maybe upgrade from the older one just because of the RGB lighting. It's not really kind of game changing or a different level of RGB. It is a little bit brighter, but that is about it really. I mean, that is probably because the original SMD LEDs and Corsair's implementation of them is probably one of the best on the market. So maybe if you was comparing this against a slightly cheaper alternative where the RGB lighting effects aren't as good, then you might see a bigger difference between the older style and the Capellix, but with this there's not a huge difference for me. Anyway, on to the thermal performance. So what we've done is we've run our usual thermal performance test, the first series of tests with the fans and pump speed all run at a maximum 100% RPM to test the raw thermal performance. And then our second set of tests where we have the noise normalised to 40 decibels. For comparison purposes, we've chosen a few other 280mm AOs, a couple of 240mm and one of the best 360mm available. We've also thrown in the current best air cooling solution, which is the Noctua NH-D15. And as you can see from the charts on screen, during our raw thermal performance tests with the CPU set at 4.0, 4.7 and 5.1 GHz, Elite Capellix records approximately 3 degrees improvement in the temperature delta compared with the RGB Pro XT, which is quite impressive to say that this is the same cooling hardware. Maybe those little tweaks that Corsair have done to the software has helped. And it's not far behind the 360mm NZXT Kraken X73. With the noise normalised at 40 decibels, we're seeing a very similar story. The Elite Capellix is up there towards the top end of the chart, but it's not quite in the same league as the NZXT Kraken X73, but this is a 280mm cooler, so the performance is again very impressive. And then in terms of noise levels, with the cooler's fans running at their maximum RPM, the Elite Capellix records a 47.5 decibels maximum noise level, which is not quite as loud as the older RGB Pro XT, and that's probably due to the fact that we could only configure these fans to 1800 RPM using either the iCUE software or connected directly to the motherboard. So my overall opinion of the Elite Capellix series is good. The thermal performance, as we've seen, is very impressive. That's solid thermal performance. We've come to expect that from these Corsair AOs. The RGB lighting is a little improvement over the previous versions. However, it's not a big enough improvement for me. It's not a game changer, and it's not really like a next level or anything like that. So if I was already an owner of an RGB Platinum, I would be in no rush to go out and buy this. It's really not worth spending the extra money on. But if you are in the market just in general for a new AO, say you're building a new system, then it's definitely one worth thinking about. Like I say, thermal performance is excellent, RGB lighting is good. However, there are cheaper options out there at £160 more or less for 280mm. This is in the top end of that kind of range. So, I mean, if you've got the money, if you are already bought into the Corsair ecosystem, then why not go for the Elite Capellix? However, if you'd rather put your cash towards a different part of the budget, such as a better GPU, it might be worth saving that 20, 30, 40 pounds on this and buying something a little cheaper. But overall, it is a very solid performing, very good looking all-in-one CPU cooler, and if I was in the market for one, I'd probably be tempted, although maybe that price is just a little bit off-putting for me. I hope you've enjoyed watching this review of the Corsair iCUE H115i Elite Capellix. If you have, then don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below. We also have very active Facebook and Twitter pages where you can catch up on all the latest tech news. And don't forget to head over to the Kit Guru website where you can see the full detailed written review of this CPU cooler. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.